U.S. consumer spending remains strong. The Commerce Department says retail sales rose a better than expected 1.1% in September. Americans bought more of everything, from electronics like Apple's new iPhone to cars. But the spending boost also came from higher gasoline prices. Consumers may be spending again because household debt is back to pre-recession levels. That's according to Moody's Analytics. Meanwhile, the National Association for Business Economics survey sees U.S. economic growth accelerating slowly next year. It also says the unemployment rate will be back above 8% for the first half of 2013, with the housing market continuing to improve. Well, that robust retail sales data and an earnings beat from Citigroup helped U.S. stocks make a comeback after last week's hefty losses. The Dow posted its biggest daily gain in a month. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq also finished solidly in the green. Financial stocks were among the standout thanks to better than expected earnings from Citigroup. The third largest U.S. bank saw growth in its lending and trading business in the third quarter. Shares of Citigroup soared 5.5% on the day. Goldman Sachs is due to release its quarterly results on Tuesday. And also boosting U.S. market sentiment, that data out over the weekend showing China's consumer price inflation easing in September, as Mike just discussed. Producer prices in China dropped from a year earlier, and there was a separate report showing that export growth had rebounded to nearly twice the rate expected in September. Well, joining me to discuss this is well-known investor Jim Rogers and chairman of Rogers Holding. Jim, thanks for joining us again.
I'm delighted to be here, Michelle. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Jim, what is your reaction to this new data out of China?
Well, I don't pay too much attention to government data. It's always suspect, if you ask me, first of all. Second of all, it always looks back, and markets look forward. And thirdly, it'll be revised. So by the time it's revised, 3 or 4 months in the future, for the past, it's not relevant.
But you don't think that this gives us some kind of indication that perhaps a soft landing is more in the offing than a hard one?
No, Michelle, some parts of the Chinese economy are going to have a very hard landing. Some parts are not going to have a landing at all. Some parts are going to continue to boom. If you're in real estate, property in China, the Chinese government has been doing its best to make it pop, and they're going to be successful. But if you're in agriculture or water treatment or pollution control, you're going to boom. You don't care if Europe falls off the face of the earth. You're going to be booming. If you do business with Europe, you know something's wrong. So some parts are going to boom, some parts are going to collapse, and some parts are just going to fiddle along.
Now, overall, I know you say you don't want to pay too much attention to the data, but the consumer price inflation was down. So does this mean that there's more room for stimulus from policymakers in China?
Of course there is. That's why they gave you the numbers, because China is now ready to start loosening up. I wouldn't loosen up if I were China. I think it's too soon to loosen up. But I'm not China. They're not going to listen to me. They're going to do what they want to do.
So what do you think they should be doing if not loosening up?
I would say tight until real estate collapses. When I say collapses, I mean collapses. A lot of real estate developers go bankrupt. Then inflation is completely licked. Not artificially, but completely licked. Then I would loosen up.
But China's been facing a lot of issues from the decline in the Eurozone, which is its biggest market for exports, and there's been an emphasis on boosting domestic supply and domestic consumption, hence the need to inject some stimulus. You're disagreeing with that? You don't think they should be artificially stimulating things?
I'm saying I would wait. You know, I take a tougher approach in most economies. I know that once inflation is there, it's very hard to defeat inflation. Then you really have to hit very, very hard.
So what would you wait for? What catalyst do you think needs to come into play before you
I would wait till I see real estate developers going bankrupt and the prices actually going down instead of being announced that they're going down.
Now, you've long been a China bull, and you are well ahead of the curve over there on that front. Recently, you've been quoted as saying that probably the best opportunity for investment right now is Myanmar. Explain that.
Oh, well, Myanmar is where China was 35 years ago. You know, 35 years ago, China's opened up from being in decline for 300 or 400 years. Myanmar closed in 1962. Burma was the richest country in Asia. They closed off, threw the foreigners out. Now Myanmar is the poorest country in Asia. It just shows you what happens when you do something like that. But they've decided to open up. They decided to do exactly what China did starting in 1978. And it's cheap, it's big, lots of natural resources. Its neighbors are India, Thailand, and China.
It's well situated geographically, but it is difficult to access Myanmar in the sense that there are no ETFs. How would you invest in Myanmar then?
Well, there are a few companies which do business in Myanmar. A couple are listed in Singapore and other places. Or you can go there and start a business. But you're right. For people like me who mainly invest in public markets, it's not very easy right now. Go and start a business. They're starting a stock market. They've got a small stock market, and they're trying to develop it. It's going to develop.
Now let's focus back on China. The export sector remains under pressure, although we did see a rise of 9.9%. What is your outlook for China's growth? You say you don't believe the government data, so what do you believe? What do you think is going to happen
Michelle,
there?
I don't believe any government data. It has nothing to do with China. It has just to do with, I know that governments have a habit of fudging things, and always have and always will. What is my outlook for China? That they're going to, as I said, some parts are going to explode, some parts are going to collapse, some parts are going to muddle along. If you do business next year and in 2014 with the West, you know something's wrong. And
all right. We're going to have more from Jim Rogers after the break.